And now live, the Executive Director of Micah Australia, Reverend Tim Costello. Appreciate your time, Reverend Costello, as always. We've heard from Labor just a short time ago. They're committing to this boost in official development assistance in the Pacific. That's to the tune of $525 million over 4 years. It's also pledging to establish a Pacific Climate Infrastructure Financing Partnership. Will all of that make a major difference in our standing in the Pacific?
Yes, it will, and we welcome this. The truth is that Australian aid is at its lowest level ever, 0.21 cents. Think 21 cents in $100. If the economy is $100, that's all we're giving, sinking to 18 cents. It's mindful to say that the Brits, the Dutch, the Scandinavians are giving 70 cents in $100, and they're not 3 or 4 times more generous than us, and they live a long way away from the Indo-Pacific. Look, the vacuum in cutting aid to the lowest levels, and we're only 21st out of 29 OECD countries when it comes to aid, is not only mean in humanitarian terms, but it's left a vacuum in the Pacific. We've seen China filling that vacuum. This is long overdue, and we welcome this. And yes, it will make a difference.
So, Reverend, when you talk about that vacuum and the trajectory of our foreign aid in recent years, is that specifically from the coalition government, or did we start to see that decline under previous Labor governments? Is it a clear sort of partisan position that we've seen on this in recent years?
Yeah, sadly, it is the coalition government. So the Abbott hockey budget cut $1 billion out of aid. The current Prime Minister made a maiden speech actually calling for the increasing of aid. And it was bipartisan up until the Abbott hockey government to increase aid to 0.5% of GNI. That's 50 cents and $100. Sadly, that bipartisanship was smashed. Labor is still committed to doing that, and we would call on the Conservatives to do it. Aid was at its highest under Robert Menzies. It was 50 cents and $100, 0.5% of GNI. This shouldn't be a blue, red, left, right issue. This is about Australia's humanitarian responsibility and our security in the Pacific. It should be above partisan politics. So I am calling on the Prime Minister to match this and recommit to 0.5% in a bipartisan way.
But Reverend Costello, is it naive to think that the Solomons' recent decision to sign this partnership with China is just about foreign aid contributions? Critics, as you know, argue that it's difficult for Australia to compete with China on funding, whether it be foreign aid in particular, climate funds. There are these allegations that the Chinese are willing to engage in corruption with politicians in the Pacific. That is a real problem, isn't it? The issue of corruption and the way some politicians act in some of these Pacific island nations.
Yeah, but the Australian aid program actually had very coherent probity checks around it. Look, China does play by different rules. There's no question about that. But when you think about the 3 tools in the kit, you have defence spending, and clearly, if Greg Sheridan's right with his withering sarcasm, we haven't, with all our defence dollars increasing, added any fire capability. Secondly, you have diplomacy. We have been underwhelming in diplomacy and cutting that. Thirdly, you have development, foreign aid, and that those cuts there have hurt us. I'm not saying it's only aid, but I'm saying the cuts to aid certainly has abetted a vacuum in the Pacific. Look, the coalition made some temporary one-off commitments during COVID to the Pacific, and we applauded them for that. But at the moment, the trajectory is aid is continuing to drop from its lowest level ever in Australian history, 21 cents and $100 to 18 cents. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that we can defeat the Chinese by increasing aid, but it sure helps because it's one of the tools at our disposal.
You know this region better than most. What sort of standing does Australia have among the Pacific Islands? Has our reputation taken a big hit in recent years? Has the relationship broadly changed significantly with these various countries? And how are we positioned when it comes to Australia and the US versus China?
Yeah, look, Australia is sometimes seen as a friend and big brother, sometimes seen as a bit loud and insensitive. Certainly Pacific Island communities are terrified about climate change, and the Australian government's tin ear, tone deafness to that concern hasn't helped. Now, China, what are they going to do about climate change? That's a fair question. That remains to be seen. But we need to actually shift the paradigm back to being big, supportive brother, which aid and increasing it is a clear statement about, diplomatically partnering, opening up opportunities for Pacific Islanders to pick fruit, to get jobs, to send the money back home, to have skills. That should be our constructive policy rather than a tin ear saying, well, climate change is your worry and, we've got to look after ourselves here. That has hurt us in the Pacific.
Reverend Tim Costello, always fascinating to get your insights. I don't think many of us would have picked that the Solomon Islands would be one of the big election issues of this campaign, but here we are, and we appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.